The nation tonight has marked a new watershed moment in the COVID-19 pandemic. 500,000 confirmed deaths.
500,000 American lives lost since the first reported death in this country just a little over a year ago. 500,000 lives, that's more than the Americans who died.
You could become eligible to sign up for your COVID vaccine today. The state of Illinois is expanding vaccine eligibility.
Very hopeful tone announcing those new guidelines to move into that next phase, phase 4 bridge, the final step before going to
I came to nursing later in life. It's not so unusual these days because a lot of people are coming into nursing as a second and third career, but back when I did in the early 90s, it was still rather unusual.
I began knowing that I wanted to be a nurse at the age of 12. One night I woke up with my sister crying, saying that she couldn't move.
I had been an English major, a graduate student in English literature, loved English, thought I was going to go on and get a doctorate and teach.
After school, I went to the hospital. I saw her on the bed, and I remember seeing the nursing staff taking care of not just my sister, but also the family.
I was getting a master's degree in Middle Eastern Studies and heard a story on the radio about a nurse, midwife, who worked for Doctors Without Borders. I thought to myself, if I could do anything else, that's what I would do.
And teaching literature didn't seem quite as urgent to me.
Some days we're a case manager. Some days we're a healthcare provider. Some days we may be a pharmacist. Some days we're a little bit of everything.
From 0 to 5 minutes, this is what's supposed to happen. From 5 to 10 minutes, the patient, depending on what happens with the student, should be going in the correct direction. But what do we do when the patient doesn't? You know, we have what's called the Vegas rules, which is that what happens in simulation stays here. We want it as organic as possible.
Simulation starting.
We try to emulate patients that the students would encounter in the hospital setting. And so a lot of the times we do try to model the behavior of care through some of our objectives for the students to learn.
Vital signs populating.
What I'm really doing is trying to anticipate, okay, what is the student about to do and how is this going to change the outcome for the patient? So it's my job to ensure that all of those little pieces of the puzzle come together to make it feel as real as possible.
I'm going to insert the NG tube.
I enjoy just seeing that light bulb go off in their head. And it's hard when you're socially distanced because that level of engagement is really, really difficult. And I think that when we went to remote for a while, that was really hard for me. We became very, very flexible. My TAs Sue, the entire team have been great. But one thing that came about just from socially distancing and just from having to change our practices here because of the pandemic, I started to notice that students really liked the smaller groups. They felt like, oh, wow, I get more one-to-one. We had a lot of things spaced out, because of the 6 feet distancing that we had to do. And I think people are being more vigilant.
When COVID first hit, I remember I think it was like on a Monday that it said everything was gonna take effect. And that Monday we were trying to figure out how can we continue to take care of our most vulnerable population while still keeping them safe. We have a large population of patients who take public transportation, who require transportation from their caseworkers, who require someone to bring them.
This past year has certainly, I think, dramatized the significance of a term that we've been throwing around for a long time, and that's intersectionality. And boy, we have seen the intersectionality of so many different issues in this past year.
I grew up in Pilsen. Seeing just the families that are there, and you start to learn that these small communities, Pilsen, Humboldt Park, Inglewood, South Shore, Back of the Yards, they're not served as much as other communities are.
Where you live and your environment and your social environment and your economic status and your access to education really does impact where you end up in life.
And there's so many of those different determinants of health that can affect a person and eventually their health outcomes. And then with the pandemic has exaggerated many of these.
For nursing specifically, for those of us like myself who was drawn to nursing because of the proximity it offered, because that was important to what it meant to be a practitioner, to the kind of comfort and healing we wanted to provide, we saw that change very dramatically. Once again, we're wearing barriers that we had not been used to wearing. It was very reminiscent for those of us who lived through the beginning of the AIDS epidemic and had to get used to universal precautions. I was just coming into nursing, to my study of nursing, when the AIDS epidemic crested, and so I came into nursing learning how to glove and to a certain extent to mask. So whether that was being in physical proximity but distancing and gowning and gloving and wearing barriers and masks over our face, or whether it meant moving to telehealth and trying to pick up the nuances of communication across a computer screen, there were a lot of challenges.
We were still open to our community. If you had an urgent need, you can still be seen.
We couldn't do this without the team.
Okay, we have this person coming in 1 week with this support staff, then we have the next week another group of people were coming. So everyone had that equity of like, you remain home, you can stay safe.
College of Nursing, College of Medicine, College of Pharmacy, College of Dentistry, Liberal Arts and Sciences, College of Engineering, School of Public Health.
We made sure that our staff was ready for it. We made sure that everyone felt comfortable knowing that we were going to have people here that potentially had COVID.
So it's been pretty amazing to see that interprofessional collaboration and the teamwork behind all of this.
So that when the patient comes in, they're like, wow, that was so easy. Yes, it was. And then we finish our COVID clinic and we're like,
And then for many of us who have families, which is just about everybody who's in healthcare, there was also the question of what risks were we willing to take, not just for ourselves, but also because of the exposure to our family members.
For me, able to pivot and go around from diagnosing people with a disease or an infection that might kill them to being able to give them a vaccine has been just incredible.
So you'll have people with tears of joy and excitement to people actually with tears of sadness too, and acknowledgement.
And after losing more than 500,000 people in our country, which is shameful, it absolutely should have never been that way. It feels really exciting that this simple vaccine gives. It feels great. You know, lots of people talk about going back to normal, and for a lot of people, and the people that I serve mostly, like, normal was not okay. And I think we have to remember that. And we don't want to go back to the normal. We want to be able to use this opportunity and the learning and the mistakes that we've made in responding to the pandemic to do better in the future.
I had this very strong intuitive pull that I wanted to be able to use my hands to offer comfort and healing.
I do think that each nurse individually has to come to what caring means to them. I think for me, caring is about engagement. It's about compassion. It's about action. And it's about being there and being there with my whole authentic self.
Always taking into consideration what the patient has been through. Care for me just means
letting the patient know that we want to make this, you know, a home away from home for you.
To really recognize their full experience and to sort of come together to try to figure out what they need and to help give that.
In my career as being a healthcare provider and also as being the recipient of healthcare for loved ones, that what it really means to me is reassurance, and not reassurance that everything's going to be fine and, you know, there's going to be a happy ending to this, but reassurance that no one is alone, that there are people who are witnessing, who are standing with someone regardless of what they're going through, both the individual and the loved ones surrounding that individual. And to the extent that we're able, without engaging in any kind of false hope, a kind of an affirmation that there is meaning in all of this. There is meaning in what happens to us. There is meaning in how we face it.